Fairies are often mistaken for ghosts. It's not uncommon for fairy to present themselves in a ghost-like way, being transparent in appearance and to the touch, or seemingly appearing out of nowhere, making their presence known to us, then moving silently around before disappearing completely. Well, I have a collection of true encounters with ghost-like fairies, which vary from benign to deadly dangerous, much like fairies themselves. About 2 miles from Burragboy, there lived two brothers by the name of Pat and Mike Geraghty. One ordinary night they were coming home, as they had 100 times before, taking a shortcut across the fields. But when they stepped in over a stile that led from the road, a faint man appeared and walked in between the two of them. The men said nothing until they reached a ditch, as they were expecting that he would leave them there, but instead he jumped the ditch with them. When they came to the gate of their own house, the spectre disappeared. The brothers entered their home and both of them fainted and fell onto the floor. To their family's grief, both men soon fell ill and died. I was 24 at the time and living in Anglesey. One night I was walking home at about 10:30 at night when there appeared just before me a very pretty young lady of ordinary size. I felt no fear at her sudden appearance, but stepped toward her and said, "How do you do?" And I put out my hand to shake hers. But my hand and my arm went right through her form. I couldn't understand this and just stood there, baffled. I reached out a few more times to touch her, but with the same result. There was no solid substance in the body, yet it remained beside me and was as beautiful a young lady as I ever saw. When I reached the door of the house where I was to stop, she was still with me. Then I said good night to her. No response being made, I asked, "Why do you not speak?" And at this, she disappeared. About 6 years ago, a man named Michael Ryan was visiting a house called Kilmanton's. He was a regular visitor there himself, but that night he had a friend with him named Sean O'Sullivan. They stayed playing cards at Kilmanton's all night until about 2 in the morning. It happened when they were walking back to Michael's home. They came to a place where it was known that a ghostly spectre was sometimes seen to lay across the road. The place on the road it lay was recognised by a gnarled hawthorn tree which stood behind a broken stone wall. As they approached, Sean saw the spectre outstretched on the road, but feeling fearful of what it might do, he said nothing and just walked around it. Michael, though, showed no reaction at all to the sight of the man on the road, and not only continued to walk right toward him, he actually stepped on his legs as he walked along the road with no reaction. When they reached Michael's house, Sean said to him, "Didn't you see him laid out on the road?" Michael told him he hadn't seen him at all, but that he had been feeling strange since walking that part of the road. When they got inside the house, Michael went to bed, and there he stayed for a year to the day. Unable to rouse himself to his feet, he was cared for by family. But slowly, wasting away. After the year had passed and Michael regained himself, he fled to America for fear he would cross that ghost again. One night I was out for a walk and a super thick fog hit. It was fun at first. I couldn't even see the end of the light cone from my headlamp and barely saw one foot in front of the other, walking my familiar path. Usually on this walk, I'd hear the sounds of the highway close by, since it's very busy all day and night, but at some point I noticed I didn't hear it anymore. As a matter of fact, I didn't hear anything but myself. There wasn't even wind anymore, and I was in an open field. There were no trees to obstruct the wind, and there's usually always some. It felt strange, but I knew this area really well, so I just decided to stay on my path and keep walking. Well, after a while, I heard a sharp whistling. That in itself isn't too weird because people walk their dogs a lot in those fields, and it was quite far away. But the whistling continued to sound through the night, and it seemed to get louder and closer. It was somewhat melodic after a while, more like a song than someone trying to catch the attention of a dog or a person. But the really weird part was that it came from the direction of the open and very muddy fields, and it was getting closer and closer to me. A person could walk in those muddy fields, but they'd make plenty of noise and probably lose a shoe or two trying to wade through that mess. I tried to just ignore it, but it was creeping me the hell out. But I kept on walking, slowly getting colder and colder, despite walking uphill and faster than I usually do. The whistling kept up, and out of the corner of my eye, I could sometimes make out a silhouette illuminated by my bobbing headlamp. And that's when I started to really freak out. I live in Germany, and we have a tale around here of the fog whistlers. There've been some historic accounts of them, with one of the major ones happening during the 30-Year War, when a small village close by Dusseldorf in 1622 was surrounded by a heavy fog overnight. Whistling was heard all around throughout the night, and on the next day, more than a dozen people were missing, never to be found. It's said that whistlers try to lure unsuspecting victims closer, but that if you can whistle their favourite tune, you might survive. If not, they'll devour you. They'll stay right at the edge of how far you can see into the fog and never come any closer. They also only really stalk people who are out and about alone. Remembering that freaked me the hell right out, and I basically ran home. These days, when fog hits, I turn on my heel and head back home to work out another day. I'm not great enough of a fool to meddle with stuff like that. It was a clear moonlight night, about midnight, when I left Laxey on foot. I was about 5 miles from Douglas when I heard the voices talking and was suddenly conscious of being in the midst of an invisible throng. As this strange feeling came over me, I saw coming up the road 4 figures, as real to look upon as human beings, and of medium size, though I am certain they were not human. When these 4, who seemed to be connected with the invisible throng, came out of the Garwick Road into the main road, I passed into a by-road leading down to a very peaceful glen called Garwick Glen, and I still had the same feeling that invisible beings were with me, and this continued for a good mile. There was no fear or emotion or excitement, but perfect calm on my part. I followed the by-road, and when I began to mount a hill, there was a sudden and strange quietness, and a sense of isolation came over me, as though the joy and peace of my life had departed with the invisible throng. From different personal experiences like this one, I am firmly of the opinion and belief that the fairies exist. One cannot say that they are wholly physical or wholly spiritual, but the impression left upon my mind is that they are an absolutely real order of beings, not human. I wonder which of these resonated most with you. Let me know in the comments. I think the spectre passively laying across the road bothers me the most. Not that I want to offend them myself, but it's tough to not allow a person to see you, then punish them for unknowingly touching you. But who knows, perhaps there is more to the story. Perhaps this man had deeply offended a fairy previously, and this trap was its revenge. I really hope you liked this creepy collection. Check out the one on screen now. I think you'll like that one too. Until next time, stay curious and be kind. Cheerio!